Okay, so we've got a short video on Sociology A-Level Year 1, preparation for Sociology Exam 1, Section B. Sociology Exam 1 contains two elements, Section A, which is Socialisation, Culture and Identity, which I've done a separate video on, and Section B, about families and household relationships, which is Section B. This is a video on that topic, the second one. So, in this part of the exam, if you've already spent 45 minutes on the first Section A, then the next section, obviously, you want to spend around 45 minutes on this section, because overall you've got 90 minutes. So you've got an hour and a half overall. So, how are we going to divide up our time? Okay, well, we've got 4 questions. So, if we spend If we spend 45 minutes on these questions, we might spend 5 minutes on the first question, 10 minutes on the next question, 10 minutes on the next question, and 20 minutes on this question here. And I hope I'm right in saying that adds up to 45, which it does. 5, 15, 25, 45. So let's deal with each question one at a time. 5 minutes on the first 5-mark question. Define and briefly explain the idea of equal relationships within the family. So basically we need to give key evidence. We could talk about the idea of equal relationships in terms of, I'm thinking of diversity, I'm thinking of power, I'm thinking of roles, I'm thinking of status. The good toolkit to use here is to think of sociology and everything we should know, which can be divided up into socialisation, culture and identity. And essentially I'm thinking of culture. Culture is made of norms, values, status, roles. Okay, norms, values, status, roles. So in that sense, equal relationships would involve equality in terms of the norms. So it's acceptable to have equality. There would be norms to do with who has a certain role in the family, who can make decisions in the family. Equality suggests that everyone has a part in making decisions and that there's more similarity in the amount of decision-making power that people have. You've got to put evidence in for your answer. So you could put in weeks, the idea of same-sex families. Study by weeks shows that they're more egalitarian or characterised by equality. Talk about the sharing of roles, the sharing of tasks, the sharing of duties, which is more common in same-sex families. The idea of symmetrical families, the idea of Wilmot and Young, study by Wilmot and Young. The concept of feminism, concept that the nuclear family is seen as patriarchal. Equal relationships might involve a rejection of patriarchy, perhaps a lack of the male. But what we're basically looking at is norms, values, status and roles, the idea of sharing, the idea of symmetry, and you need to put evidence in terms of perspectives, concepts, studies, data, contemporary examples in the way I've done there. Second question, 10 minutes, identify and briefly describe 2 trends in marriage. So 2 things are going to be in this second question, 2 things. And essentially, we want to spend about 5 minutes on each of those things, whatever they are, whether it's a pattern, a trend, a feature of the family. So there could be different things, pattern of divorce, could be trends in marriage or fertility. There could be the features or characteristics of a family type. For example, we've looked at the beanpole family. What are its features? It's multi-generational. It's got a wider number of people from different age backgrounds in the same family. So features of the nuclear family, it socialises its members, it's got economic cooperation, it's got reproduction, it's got sexual role or purpose. So we've got features of the family could also be an aspect of this question. Whatever the question is, identify 2 things clearly, as broad as possible. That is the key, as broad as possible. So instead of looking at something very specific, we've got to look at as wide as possible and then give specific evidence to support that wide point. So for example, reasons for divorce, might be 2 reasons for divorce. In that case, we've got to look at not just secularisation, but look at something wider than secularisation, which could be social changes, economic changes. That's much wider than secularisation and the Divorce Act. So go as wide as possible. The next one looks at reasons for changes in one thing. So this is to do with patterns and trends. And again, 10 minutes on this next question. With this one, you've got to give evidence. You're going to do about 3 or 4 points in 10 minutes with evidence, perspectives, studies, concepts, data, contemporary examples. Changes in the birth rate, fertility could be influenced by social change, political change, economic change, cultural change. And with each of those 4 points, I could bring in different perspectives like feminism and women's rights. I could bring in functionalism and the change towards industrialization. I could bring in postmodernism and changes in relationships, the shift towards a feminized labour market, the growth of divorce. We could bring in the new right perspective, the culture of, the loss of culture, the moral decay. So you can see for spec, social, political, economic, cultural change, I could bring in 4 perspectives, which could be supporting that, and then studies to support that as well, based on the perspectives. Last question, evaluate the view that the nuclear family is no longer the dominant family type. So this one is, if we spend 20 minutes on this, we've probably got to spend 10 minutes explaining and outlining, and 10 minutes evaluating to get good marks. Because essentially they're looking for an explanation which shows good knowledge, but also good analytical and evaluative skills as well. We talk about strengths and weaknesses for at least 10 minutes. So I try and do about 3 or 4 paragraphs to support the view, and 3 or 4 paragraphs to go against the view as well. With this one, I could probably say postmodernist and new right in the first section, and I could give evidence about choice and change, and the moral decay and permissiveness, and concern about benefit dependency, the underclass, and so on. Bring in those postmodernist and new right views, the studies, Beck and Giddens, and pure relationships, and Charles Murray, and Dennis, and Marsland, nanny state, underclass. And then to criticise that, I can bring in Robert Chester, the idea that the family is still traditional, the neo-conventional family, continuities in family life, people are still getting married but later on in life, people still aspire to be married culturally. Catherine Hakim talking about adaptive women, where most women are not prioritising career and they're still, prioritising or sharing responsibility on the family, not just career. So, it's their preference, and so the nuclear family is still more dominant than other types. We're evaluating the view with those kinds of things. That's a post-feminist view. The functionalists might emphasise the nuclear family is still more universal, the majority type. The divorce rate is 50%, that means the majority are still nuclear and not divorced. So and there's statistical evidence to show that divorce is starting to decrease in recent years. So try and bring in a range of perspectives, studies, concepts, data, and contemporary examples for that. 10 minutes explaining, 10 minutes strengths and weaknesses with the view, and probably quite a few weaknesses. Okay, so what you're probably doing with the strengths is explaining, and then the weaknesses to go against it. Try and bring in the perspectives, and try and give evidence. I hope that's useful. If you have questions, email daniel_butcher@hotmail.co.uk.